Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family, helping us help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to this show in the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Kathleen Marcath. She is here to celebrate My Monster Truck Goes With Me Everywhere, a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Before we invite Kathleen into the studio, we want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Be sure to sign up for our free newsletter. Find out what's coming up on the podcast. Find out what you might have missed. And be sure to download all the other great things that we make available to families on our website. Please also connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Jedley Magic on Twitter, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Join us right now from the state of Michigan. I'm really, really happy to be able to speak to our guest today. She is the author of My Monster Truck, which is part of the American Sign Language series. Please welcome to the show, Kathleen Marcath. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm really excited to be here, too. You started to tell me before we started recording that My Monster Truck was inspired by your grandson. Is that right?
It was. When he was 3 and still today, he just loves monster trucks. So as I began to write the story for a poetry contest, I thought, oh, this would be the perfect book for the sign language book I've always wanted to write. So, yeah. So he inspired me with his monster trucks and his, how kids are so excited and passionate about everything. So he is about his monster trucks.
That's awesome. Tell me where did this passion to write an American Sign Language book stem from?
Well, before the sign language, I had always wanted to write a children's book. Then I got hooked on sign language and eventually went to school. And it was in my classes at Madonna University. I was in an English class, and we were learning about different types of literature for children. And we talked about inclusion literature, and that was interesting. About the same time, in my signing class, we had to sign a picture story book. So my first thought was, well, I'm going to go find a picture story book that has sign language in it, and I'll use that one to tell my story. But I couldn't find any. Mm-hmm. I could not find any. So that was a seed for it. Yeah.
Hey, we haven't had a chance really to talk about American Sign Language here on the podcast. A lot of people have seen other people sign. Certainly there people see interpreters, especially now during the pandemic. That was very obvious that every government official, every news briefing had an interpreter out there. And that is certainly a great advance over the last decades, so that we have that service for people who are deaf or hearing impaired. But I don't think people understand. American Sign Language is the way I understand it, when you're communicating with sign language, you're sometimes spelling words with your fingers, and other times there are a sign that stands for a word itself. I know that was kind of awkward and not quite English, but am I kind of close to being right there?
Yeah, yes. Well, sign language is a visual language.
Mm-hmm.
It uses, to make a sign, there are five parameters. There's the hand shape, my. Mm-hmm. There's a location, here, and then there's movement. Thank you. So, and then included in that is your facial expression and your body language. So one thing that we did in the book was we introduced a classifier. So I can identify my monster, and I could spell truck, or I could describe truck, or I could drive a truck. So in the book, what we did is we identified the monster truck and gave it a classifier. Now this classifier you can use to take your truck over ramps. It can spin in circles. You can bring another one along. They can race together. So yeah, that's a classifier, and there's lots of different classifiers that you can use, but they're wonderful for telling stories and conveying information.
So am I getting right, since this is a podcast and audio and we can't see your beautiful signing, and Kathleen does have some beautiful abilities to sign. I'm watching. I think it's a beautiful language. It is very visual. And you were making, when you're referring to a classifier, you were making a sign with your thumb and pointer finger and middle finger. Is this sort of like a cue that I'm switching from finger spelling to signing? Or
no. So finger spelling, you would begin learning finger spelling with the alphabet. So for each letter of the alphabet, there's a hand shape that identifies the letter A. Letter S is simply a fist. And so, yeah, finger spelling, right. Let me explain that. Yeah, so it's a very visual language. You would finger spell. Also, when you sign, not everyone, but signers will mouth to help you, get the finger spelling. So yeah, some words are finger spelled, but a majority of things there's a sign for, or, setting up a classifier, identifier. So does that answer your question?
It does. It's awfully difficult to verbally describe something that is so visual. So I appreciate your effort. And this is going to sound like a silly question, and I apologize to you or to anybody else that thinks this is silly, but it's coming from a sincere place. One of the things that we have talked about a lot here on the podcast is dyslexia. And, the fact that we have these 26 letters that represent 42 different sounds. And I'm guessing as you're finger spelling, you're only using those 26 shapes for each letter. Do you find that folks with who have difficulty reading because of dyslexia, they can't read the printed word, do they have the same kind of issues with finger spelled words?
I'm not an expert on dyslexia, but I can tell you that when you you're trying to teach a child a written word, and you show that child, you finger spell that word for the child, and you may show them a picture of what that, if it's a car, so you might see the word car and show them a picture of a car and finger spell car, and all those things come together. And I find, I've seen, and I don't know what the children's IEPs were, their diagnosis were, but I've seen children that have not functioned well in a classroom catch on to sign language and build their confidence. Wow. So, yeah. And, we're all different learners. I'm learning. I'm very obviously a visual learner. Some people do better with reading. Some people do better with visual. So we're all different kinds of learners. But I have seen the sign language help a child focus and just make the connection. So these are the letters. And when you finger spell, it's best if you sound it out. So if you would spell, instead of, like I'm holding up the letter C-A-R, not thinking C-A-R in your mind, but sounding K-R. And that makes your finger spelling fluent.
This is really,
and it also, yeah.
This is really fascinating. I'm guessing, and again, this is just a guess, that you didn't write My Monster Truck just for kids who are deaf or hearing impaired.
No, no. I'm a believer that sign language has value for everyone. And like I say, I've seen it in classrooms help the child that, and I don't know again the reasons that they would be shy or not participating or feeling less than the rest of the classroom. And I've seen in teaching those classes sign language, they just blossom and bloom. So it has benefits for everyone. And the hearing classes that I've taught it to, they just loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
They just had so much fun with it.
Now, as I understand it, so my initial thought when I was introduced to sign language, I had two kind of introductions. I work with kids with severe developmental disabilities, right at the end of my career in human services. And so we used a lot of very simple signs like I want and I'm hungry and thank you with those kids. And then when I met my beautiful wife, I was very pleased to find out that she had studied sign language and special education and worked with a number of deaf and hearing impaired students. And that's when I started to understand that there was the finger spelling, and it was, it was much more than the simple 5 or 6 signs that I had learned. One of the things that surprised me is I thought since there was a sign for thank you, and the sign for thank you, I think I'm doing it right, is your hand up to your chin and coming down from your chin. That, wow, now we have a way to speak to everybody in every language, because everybody who's deaf must have the same signs. But I wasn't right. There's different signs for different languages.
There are different American. Here it's American Sign Language. But you have British and almost any language, different sign languages. And even within American Sign Language, there's different dialects.
So people sign with accent.
Absolutely.
I have to ask, so somebody from Boston would sign without using the R's?
Oh, well, that's a good point. I'm not sure. But no, definitely there, just the sign for truck. I use the classifier, which is the number 3 in sign language and holding it horizontally. But truck is supposed to be fingerspelled, but I've seen since deaf people from different parts of the country use different signs for truck. I've seen 4 different signs that they use for truck. So yeah. Wow.
Hey, is there a history? Is there one person or one group of people who kind of happened upon sign language and formalized it and kind of put a dictionary together?
Yeah. The whole history of American Sign Language. And I love this story. A pastor, young minister, just earns his degree in ministry, and he's on the beach. And there's a group of girls playing together, but there's this one girl who's all alone. And he asks the group of girls, why aren't you playing with her? And they say, because she's deaf. She doesn't talk. And so this minister spends the whole day with this girl, writing her name in the sand. And by the end of the day, so she's like 11, 12 years old. By the end of the day, she learns that she has a name, and her name is Alice. That just brings tears to me. Yeah. So Thomas Gallaudet was the man, and he, went home with the daughter. Her father was a doctor, and he said, "This is amazing." And his daughter just lit up. I have a name. Alice, I have a name.
Wow.
So he sent him to, I hope I get this right now, to France, well, to England, to learn, because they had heard that they had sign language there, and he was to bring this home with him. So, long story short, he goes, he meets a man giving a display for showing his students, but he's French. So he goes home with him, goes back to France with him, spends 2 years there, brings Laurent Clerc back to the United States with him, and they start a school for the deaf, which is Gallaudet University.
I've had the pleasure of visiting Gallaudet. In fact, one of my wife's bridesmaids attended Gallaudet. I was really surprised. It was one of the loudest places I've ever been to in my life.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people think, well, somebody who is deaf, of course, is quiet all the time, and that certainly is not the case. There was loud, banging bass music because the people could certainly feel the bass, and there are different levels. Some people are able to hear, and so you crank up the music and the volume, and you help those folks. I was just amazed. It was one of the most wonderful experiences I had. Tell me, why do you think it's you shared that a lot of kids in the special needs classes that you worked with who weren't necessarily deaf or hearing impaired really blossomed as they started to learn sign language. Why do you think it might be helpful for a typical kid to start to learn sign and to learn different and to learn how to speak on some level in sign language?
Yeah, just we all have different gifts and talents, right? Mm-hmm. And I think sign language, well, actually, it activates another portion of your brain that you know, if you're not using sign language, so it enhances your brain cognition. I've, read several research papers on that. And so I think that's a very good reason in itself to increase your brain cognition. One study was done with second graders in over 2 years. And they had a group of students who volunteered to take sign language classes with a deaf teacher. The other group of students took a different elective class. So the beginning of second grade, middle, and, the several testing throughout that 2 years, the students who took the sign language classes, learned sign language, produced, their scores were higher than the other students in all of the areas of academic testing. So
I think that you're pointing out something that we've touched on here, and that when we're doing different things, we're using different parts of our brain. We're activating different parts of our brain. And if you're only learning something by reading words off a page, you're only learning that with one part of your brain. However, if you're learning that from words on a page and then someone speaking to you, and then you're also answering or translating it into sign, or you're writing it down, now you're learning with 2 or 3 or 4 parts of your brain, and you have a better chance of comprehending it and actually learning it.
True. And we did that when I was working with one student. I was encouraging, the rest of the class to, learn finger spelling and use sign language. And where it was when they have their spelling, to practice their spelling words. Because now they have it. And if they practice, a few of them got it, but if you practice spelling with your fingers and you're taking your spelling test, you can always go back to your fingers to spell.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine that would be really great for kids. We talk to athletes, talk about having muscle memory. Your muscles don't really have memory, but what has the memory is that part of your brain that controls your muscles. And so if you're stumped and all of a sudden you can't remember how to spell car or determine, that's the word I can never remember how to spell. If I learn how to finger spell that, I could just kind of go back and tap into that part of my brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. What's been the response to folks, both kids and parents and teachers, who've read My Monster Truck?
Well, the response is they love it. They, the reviews have been amazing. We received a Kirkus starred review. Feathered Quill wrote a wonderful review. But parents and teachers and children, Isaac, who was the deaf illustrator, he said during our course of, figuring this all out, when a deaf child sees someone in a book signing, their faces will light up. And I thought, that would be wonderful. And that is what is happening. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot here in the program about about books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I think this is a beautiful book that truly demonstrates that. It's a mirror, allowing that kid who is deaf to see himself on the pages of a book, allowing a typical child to see that, wow, there are ways that kids who are deaf can communicate, and ways that I can communicate with them. And then the sliding glass door, actually helping kids learn some basic signs so that they can walk through that sliding glass door into the community and build relationships with folks who are deaf and hearing impaired.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that sliding glass door.
Yeah.
Very great. Yeah. Good analogy. Yeah, very good.
That's really, really wonderful. I'm really excited. One of the things that I'm a big advocate of is just, when you're meeting folks who are different, being vulnerable and being able to say to them, I'm sorry, I don't speak your language, but I took the time to say hello. I took the time to learn how to say hello in your language, and also to say, I'm sorry, I can't speak your language. How important do you think, or how much of an icebreaker would it be if children just learn how to say hello in sign? Nice to meet you. I'd like to be your friend.
Oh, wonderful. And you'll hear that from the deaf community, that is something they do appreciate, that if your signing is horrible and you get half of them wrong, they're okay. They're like, I'm just honored that you have taken enough time to learn anything in sign language to communicate with me. There's stories, Starbucks apparently has a few, if you stop there, they can sign what kind of coffee you want. So yeah, it's to have somebody care enough to communicate with you, because the deaf community is rich and vibrant, and they have so much to offer. They're beautiful people. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. I think I've told this story here in the show. I do educational magic shows around the country, and I was in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. And typically what I would do before a show is shake hands with kids. I guess we can't do that now for a while until the pandemic is completely over. But I would greet kids in different language and just go down a line of kids and say, hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, nice to meet you, buenos dias. And I, at the end of this one line was a girl who was deaf. And so as I'm going down, the other kids said, oh, she can't hear, she doesn't speak. And at that point, I just stopped and I said hello, and I said, you have a beautiful smile. And signed, you have a beautiful smile. And oh my goodness, the way her eyes lit up. And she ended up coming up and being part of my show, and she was levitated up on the stage, and it was just great. And the neat thing, Kathleen, is when she finished her trick, when she came down back to earth and she came up to the center of the stage to take her bow, all the kids in the audience, without anybody cueing them, applauded for her in the American sign language by I guess wiggling their hands. I guess that's the way you describe it, waving their hands back and forth. And so that was a really, really special moment.
very special. That was totally awesome.
Yeah.
And she will never forget that day.
Well, I certainly have never forgotten her. Pam was her name. She was a very, very beautiful kid. Kathleen, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about My Monster Truck.
Well, you can go to our website, aslpicturebooks.com. You can go to Instagram. It's ASL Picture Books, and Facebook, ASL Picture Books. The book is available on Amazon, Bookshop. I guess those are the main ones. Barnes and Noble. Any bookstore can, order it for you. And if you ask your bookstore if they have it, they might stock the shelves with that.
I was just going to say, we are really supportive of small and independent bookshops, and you can just pick up the phone, give them a call, say, hey, can you order My Monster Truck by Kathleen Marcath for me, please? And I'm sure they'll be able to get it for you in a day or two. Your book, your website is aslpicturebooks.com. So there's an S on the end of picture book. So it's plural. So we can expect more books in the future?
Yes, we, and I say we, my grandchildren, because they are very influential in this process, are working on a couple.
That's wonderful. Well, it's certainly a gift to folks in the deaf and hearing impaired community, but I also believe that your book series would be a wonderful gift to the whole world, because anything we can do to not only open up our doors, but open up our hearts to folks who are different, the brighter and the richer our world becomes. So I'm really thankful that you're creating this series.
Well, thank you. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I'm very delighted to hear all the things you are up to as well.
Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of My Monster Truck, part of the American Sign Language Picture Book series. And the guest has been Kathleen Marcath. Kathleen, thank you so much for being part of our show.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. It was a delightful experience.
Please be sure to join us for another doubleheader Saturday. And the next episode of the podcast features authors Gerald Hoover and Daryl Gregory. You're going to love them. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you're the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest in the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic book, and it does not cost a thing. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to where it says Be a Guest. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Kathleen Marcath. Please be sure to check out My Monster Truck Goes With Me Everywhere, a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Justina Thompson, Helen Fraser. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.